I don't know who invited him, my mother whispered. Her face had turned completely white. I followed her trembling gaze toward the back of the church. A tall gray-haired man stood quietly beside the open doors, holding a small box wrapped in faded blue paper. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't crying. He was simply looking at me, as if he'd waited his whole life for this moment. Then he spoke. Emily. Only one word. But somehow it felt like he'd been saying my name in his heart for decades. My mother grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. No, she gasped. This can't be happening. The room around me faded into silence. Because 29 years earlier, she had told me my father died before I was born. So who was the man standing at my wedding? I had spent my entire childhood believing I was the daughter of a ghost. Whenever Father's Day came around at school, I drew pictures for other dads. When classmates asked about my father, I smiled politely. He passed away before I was born. People always looked at me with sympathy. Teachers hugged me. Friends apologized. I accepted it because that was the only story I had ever known. My mother, Diane, raised me alone in a quiet town outside Portland. She worked double shifts as a nurse. She packed my lunches. She stayed awake helping me with homework even after exhausting 12-hour days. She wasn't perfect. She could be distant. Sometimes she'd stare out the kitchen window for hours. Sometimes I'd hear her crying after midnight. Whenever I asked about Dad, she'd end the conversation immediately. He was a wonderful man. What happened? A car accident. Do you have pictures? They were destroyed. Did his family know me? They all passed away. Every answer was short. Every door stayed locked. As a child, I believed grief looked exactly like that. As an adult, I stopped asking. Life moved on. I became a wedding planner, which everyone thought was ironic. I spent every weekend helping strangers celebrate forever while secretly wondering what it felt like to have an entire family sitting together. Then I met Noah. He laughed with his whole heart. He loved rainy mornings, terrible coffee, and rescue dogs. Most importantly, he never treated my missing father like something broken. One evening, while we assembled furniture in our first apartment, he asked softly, "If your dad could see you today, what do you think he'd say?" I smiled. "I honestly don't know." Noah squeezed my hand. "I think he'd be proud." For some reason, that sentence stayed with me. Months later, Noah proposed under the giant oak tree where we had our first picnic. Life finally felt complete. Until 6 weeks before the wedding. Mom insisted on handling the guest list herself. "It's one less thing for you to worry about," she said. I didn't argue. She was unusually involved in every detail. She approved flowers. She rejected caterers. She even changed the seating chart 3 different times. At first I thought she was just being an excited mother. Now, looking back, she wasn't planning a wedding. She was preparing for something else. 3 days before the ceremony, I walked into her house unexpectedly. She was standing in the living room, feeding papers into the fireplace. Not throwing them away. Burning them. The flame swallowed old letters tied together with a faded red ribbon. She jumped when she saw me. "What are you doing?" "Just cleaning." I picked up a photograph lying beside the fireplace. The edges were burned. Most of the picture was gone. But one corner remained untouched. It showed a young man holding a newborn baby. Only half his face was visible. My heart skipped. "Mom." She snatched it from my hand so quickly it tore in half. "It's nothing." "The baby." Her voice cracked. "It isn't you." She threw the remaining pieces into the fire. I stared as they curled into black ash. That night I barely slept. For the first time in years, I wondered if my mother had lied. Not because I wanted to doubt her. Because something inside me suddenly refused to believe the story I'd been told my entire life. The next morning, I visited the county records office during my lunch break. I searched for my father's death certificate. The clerk typed for several minutes. Then frowned. That's strange. What? I can't find anyone matching that name or date. Could you check again? She did. 5 more minutes passed. Finally she looked up. I'm sorry. There doesn't appear to be any death record at all. I walked back to my car feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. If my father hadn't died, then where had he been for 29 years? And why had my mother spent my entire life convincing me he never could come back? I didn't know it then. But someone else had just learned I was getting married. And he had already begun the journey that would change everything. The church fell silent. The music stopped halfway through the first note. Every guest turned toward the man standing at the entrance. He looked exhausted, as if life had worn him down 1 year at a time. His gray suit wasn't expensive. His shoes carried the dust of a long journey. But his eyes never left mine. My mother stepped in front of me. You need to leave. Her voice wasn't just angry. It was terrified. The man swallowed hard. I didn't come to ruin today. You've already done enough. I only came because. His voice broke. Because this is the first time I've ever known where my daughter would be. My heart pounded. My daughter. He had said it so naturally. As if those words had lived inside him for decades. Noah gently took my hand. Emily, he whispered, you deserve to hear him. My mother turned sharply. No. He lies. That's what he does. The guests shifted uncomfortably. The pastor quietly stepped aside. Nobody knew whether the wedding was still happening. I looked at the stranger. If you're really my father. My voice shook. Tell me something only my father would know. He reached into his coat pocket. Instead of speaking, he held out the faded blue box. I've carried this for 29 years. I slowly opened it. Inside was a tiny silver bracelet with a small heart charm. Tears instantly filled my eyes. I had seen it before. In an old baby picture. The only baby picture my mother had ever allowed me to keep. She had once told me. You lost that bracelet when you were a baby. Apparently. I hadn't. The man smiled sadly. You never lost it. Your mother gave it back to me the day she disappeared. The church suddenly felt too small. My breathing became shallow. I looked at Mom. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Is he telling the truth? She stayed silent. For the first time in my life. My mother had no answer. Noah quietly turned toward the guests. We're going to take a short break. Nobody argued. Within minutes the church had emptied except for the 4 of us. Me. Mom. Noah. And the man who claimed to be my father. My name is Daniel Carter, he said softly. I know. The word surprised even me. His face. Now that I looked closely. The shape of his jaw. The little scar above his eyebrow. The blue eyes I saw every morning in my own mirror. I wasn't imagining it anymore. I was looking at myself 30 years older. Mom finally spoke. You shouldn't have come. I had to. You promised. I promised because you told me Emily would have a better life without me. I stared at her. What does that mean? She covered her face. Daniel answered instead. We were 22. We had nothing. I worked construction. Your mother had just started nursing school. We weren't perfect. He smiled faintly. But we loved each other. Mom whispered. Stop. Daniel continued anyway. When she became pregnant, I was terrified. I took every extra job I could. I even worked nights. One morning I came home. His hands trembled. And the apartment was empty. My chest tightened. She left? He nodded. There was only one letter. He reached carefully into his wallet. The paper looked fragile with age. I've carried it every day. He handed it to me. The handwriting belonged to my mother. Daniel. Don't look for us. The baby deserves a better future than you can give. Please let us go. Pretend we never existed. I felt sick. I looked at Mom. You wrote this? Tears rolled down her face. Yes. Why? You don't understand. Then help me understand. She took a long breath. My father. She stopped. My father hated Daniel. Daniel looked down. He thought I wasn't good enough. He owned half the businesses in town. He wanted Diane to marry the son of one of his partners. Mom nodded. When I refused, her voice cracked. He threatened to destroy Daniel. He said he'd make sure he never found work again. He said if I stayed. She couldn't finish. Daniel quietly did it for her. He said he'd accuse me of crimes I never committed. I blinked. What? Mom whispered. My father knew people. He had influence. I believed him. I was 22. I was scared. So you ran? She nodded. I thought I was saving both of you. Daniel looked at me. I searched anyway. 4 years. I hired private investigators. I checked hospitals. I checked schools. Every lead ended the same way. He smiled sadly. Your mother changed your last name. I slowly turned toward Mom. You erased him. She burst into tears. I thought if you loved him, you'd spend your whole life missing him. So I buried him instead. Silence filled the room. 29 years. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Every graduation. Every Father's Day. She had carried the secret alone. Daniel reached into his jacket again. I have something else. He unfolded dozens of yellow envelopes tied together with blue string. I wrote you one letter every year. I stared at the stack. There are 29. I never knew where to send them. You wrote to me? He nodded. Every birthday. I hoped. His eyes filled with tears. That somehow life would give them to you. I untied the string. The first envelope was dated the week after I was born. The last one had been written only 6 months earlier. My hands trembled as I opened the newest letter. The first sentence stole the air from my lungs. Dear Emily, if you're reading this, then somehow the miracle I stopped praying for has finally happened. Before I could read another word, the church door suddenly burst open. A woman rushed inside, breathing hard. She looked directly at Daniel. Then at me. Her face turned pale. Oh no. She whispered. He found you first. The room froze. I had never seen this woman before. But whatever she was about to say was about to change everything I thought I had finally understood. The woman stood in the doorway, struggling to catch her breath. Daniel's face drained of color. Lena, what are you doing here? She looked from him to me, then to my mother. I tried to stop him, she said quietly. I knew if he came today, everything would come out. My stomach tightened. Who are you? She stepped closer, her eyes full of kindness instead of guilt. My name is Lena. She hesitated. I'm Daniel's wife. The words hit me like ice water. I looked at Daniel. You're married? He nodded slowly. Yes. Something inside me cracked. So you built another family? No. His answer came instantly. I built a life, but I never replaced you. Lena reached into her purse and carefully pulled out a worn notebook. I think you should see this. She handed it to me. The first page read, Emily's birthdays. Every year had its own entry. Photos of parks Daniel had visited on my birthdays. Notes about the weather. Little messages he wished he could have said. Emily turned 5 today. I hope someone told her she's brave. Emily is 12 now. I wonder if she likes music. Emily is 18 today. I drove past the university because I imagined she'd be there somewhere. By the final page, my vision blurred with tears. Lena smiled softly. I met Daniel 15 years ago. He told me about you on our second date. He said there was already one woman who owned the biggest part of his heart. I looked at Daniel. You talked about me? Every day. Lena laughed through her tears. Trust me, sometimes I wished he'd stop. For the first time that day. Someone smiled. Even Noah. Then Lena's expression changed. There's one more thing you deserve to know. She looked directly at my mother. Your father didn't just threaten Daniel. Mom slowly closed her eyes. You don't have to. She does. Lena turned to me. 3 years after your mother disappeared, Daniel was arrested. My heart stopped. What? Daniel looked down. Your grandfather accused me of stealing money from one of his companies. I didn't. But I couldn't prove it. He had witnesses. He had lawyers. I spent 18 months in prison. I stared at him in disbelief. 18 months. He nodded. By the time I was released, your grandfather had died. The case quietly disappeared. Lena gently added. The court later admitted there wasn't enough evidence. But by then, the damage had already been done. I looked at my mother. She was crying harder than I'd ever seen. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't know. Daniel nodded. I believe you. Those 4 words surprised everyone. Even her. She looked up. After everything. You still believe me? Daniel sighed. I spent years blaming you. I imagined 100 different reasons. But standing here today, I see the same frightened young woman I fell in love with. You weren't cruel. You were scared. Mom covered her face and sobbed. I'm sorry. I stole her father. I stole your daughter. I stole 29 years. Daniel slowly walked toward her. For one long moment. No one moved. Then he quietly wrapped his arms around her. Not as husband and wife. Not as lovers. Just as 2 people carrying the same unbearable pain. They cried together. And somehow, watching them forgive each other hurt even more than watching them fight. I looked at Noah. I don't know what to do. He smiled gently. You don't have to fix the past. You only have to decide what comes next. I walked toward Daniel. He looked terrified. As if he expected me to walk past him. Instead, I threw my arms around him. For a second he froze. Then he held me like a father finally allowed to love his child. I'm sorry, I whispered. You have nothing to apologize for. I missed my whole life with you. His voice broke. I know. But you're here now. A few minutes later, the guests quietly returned to the church. Nobody asked questions. Nobody complained about the delay. The pastor smiled warmly. I performed hundreds of weddings. He looked at me. I've never seen a family rebuilt before one. A gentle laugh spread through the room. The tension finally lifted. Then the pastor asked. Emily. Who will walk you down the aisle? I looked at my mother. She immediately shook her head. No. You should choose him. I took her hand. Then I reached for Daniel's. I've spent my whole life with one parent. And I've spent today finding the other. Tears filled both of their eyes. I don't want to choose. So. I smiled through my tears. Will both of you walk with me? Neither of them could answer. They simply nodded. Together. As the music began again, my mother stood on my left. My father stood on my right. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I belonged. Months later, Daniel and Lena came to Sunday dinner almost every week. The conversations were awkward at first. Then comfortable. Then joyful. Mom and Lena became unlikely friends. Noah loved hearing Daniel's terrible jokes. One evening, while cleaning the attic in my mother's house, we found a dusty cardboard box hidden behind old blankets. Inside were dozens of photographs. Every picture my mother had claimed was destroyed. There was Daniel holding me as a newborn. Daniel asleep beside my crib. Daniel painting my nursery. Mom looked at the box and quietly admitted. I couldn't throw them away. I just couldn't bear to look at them. We framed every photograph. Not because they erased the years we lost, but because they reminded us that love had always been there. Buried beneath fear. Sometimes the greatest lie isn't told because someone hates you. Sometimes it's told because someone loves you so much that they make the worst decision of their life trying to protect you. My mother lost 29 years to fear. My father lost 29 years to hope. And I almost lost them both to a story that was never true. On our first wedding anniversary, Daniel handed me one final envelope. It wasn't old. It was brand new. Inside was a single sentence. Dear Emily, thank you for finally giving me the chance to become your father. I still keep all 30 letters together. The 29 he never got to send. And the one he finally could. Because some families aren't broken forever. Sometimes. They simply spend years finding their way back home.